enough people to get started. So, hello and welcome to This is Recruiting. Good morning to everyone present here, or good afternoon, good evening, no matter where you are. If you are joining us for the first time, This is Recruiting is a webinar series that we have created at HackerEarth to bring together industry experts in the field of recruiting and tech hiring to give you their insights and share their stories to help you learn a little bit more. My name is Rebecca. I'm going to be your host for today. And before we get started, if you are here for the first time and hearing about HackerEarth for the first time, let me tell you a little bit about us. So we help you with your entire cycle of tech recruiting. And we do this because we have an entire suite of tools that can help you across the cycle to help you increase your hiring efficiency by up to 60%. So if you want to know more about that, let me tell you, we have tools for attracting and sourcing candidates. We help you screen them through our assessment tool, only skill-based assessments that evaluates over 15 plus job skills and helps you hire across 80 plus job skills over 15 different roles. We have a remote interviewing tool called Face Code, which helps you interview your candidates in real time to help you better assess them, better assess their coding abilities. And finally, we have tools for upskilling and continuous engagement. And we do this via our hackathons. So if you would like to know more about HackerEarth and the incredible things that we're doing for tech hiring, especially during these trying times when there are hiring freezes and things that are happening right now in the recruiting world, I do suggest you check us out. You can visit us at hackerearth.com/recruit. I will be sharing a few more details about us shortly. But before, let's get into the main aspect of our webinar today. We have a very special guest joining us, Mahesh Srivastava, the Co-CTO for Louisa, a team at Goldman Sachs. Hi, Mahesh. So great to have you here.
Hi, Rebecca. Great to be a part of this event. Thanks for having me.
So let me tell you a little bit about Mahesh itself. Mahesh is a technology leader with nearly 2 decades of experience in building high-performing technology teams. He has led companies through successful mergers and acquisitions. He's an engineer by qualification, an alumnus from my college itself, and a graduate from the prestigious Indian Institute of Management in Bangalore. He has held several leadership positions in Fortune 100 companies like Cardinal Health and Goldman Sachs. He was part of the executive leadership team at Mscripts that led the company through profitability and eventually an exit with the Fortune 14 Cardinal Health. In his current capacity, Mahesh is the Co-CTO for Louisa, a team at Goldman Sachs. He is responsible for building a high-performing engineering team that is aligned with the business strategy to expand markets, increase revenue, and drive down costs. Mahesh is passionate about disruptive technologies and specializes in building teams and software products from the ground up. He has led teams that deliver cutting-edge applications in a highly competitive market space, spanning investment banks, higher education, and healthcare technology. He's also an advisor for several startups to help validate and scale their product, technology, and business strategy during their journey to profitability. He's a compassionate leader who brings top talent together across geographies to build high-performing tech teams. So thank you so much, Mahesh. Just to give everyone here a little bit of context, what we're going to be discussing today is a little different from what we've normally covered in our webinars. We're going to be talking about building teams from the ground up. And that's such an important topic when you're building tech teams especially. So I'm sure, a lot of the insights that we have today are going to help our audience greatly. And thank you, Mahesh, for choosing to discuss this with us.
Thank you. My pleasure, Rebecca.
Before we get started, do you have any, opening remarks for our audience about how your experience so far in scaling tech teams and just hiring from the ground up?
Sure. So we are actually in a very different phase of in the industry with the looming recession and job cuts all over the place. So I think building teams ground up has got a new set of challenges in front of us at this point in time. Now, Obviously, when it comes to building teams ground up, you fall back on the company's brand image, the company's reputation as well. And that really helps
Definitely.
build the organization to start with. But we are in a situation at this point in time where the strategies that we used to use, maybe I would say even 3 years or 5 years ago, to build teams ground up, is very different from what needs to be applied on the ground today. And I'm sure the strategy needs to keep evolving as hiring managers, engineering leaders like myself. We keep thinking of different ways of attracting, retailing, growing talent, getting people to scale the organization as well. So, yeah, probably leave it there and let you ask me more questions, Rebecca.
Definitely, yeah. Because our first main question, so far we've been discussing a lot of ground up hiring itself. So the main question I have are, what are some of the challenges you've observed while hiring positions, especially tech positions in the early stages of, a platform with a limited brand presence? And how does employer branding work for a company in such a case? Because we've been talking about teams and startups, and I think most of our audience today are also from smaller businesses struggling with a lot of brand image right now.
Right. No, great question, Rebecca. And I think this is something that larger corporations take for granted, the brand presence itself. And I probably learned this probably the hard way. And I've been lucky to actually build a certain brand image for the companies that I've been a part with. So now employer branding is a very challenging problem to solve. And it's not an issue alone with startups, because I would think that even a large enterprise trying to break through into a new area that they're typically not known for, or if they're incubating an idea, really need to build on that brand presence to attract the right talent to help them with that particular growth vision that they have.
Right.
Now, it's obviously much easier for a large enterprise because there is a certain brand image that they can fall back on. But in a startup, the initial hires are the most important for the growth of the organization. And given that you have limited or no brand presence, like, for example, I can talk about my current organization. We technically do not have any brand presence. And even while I was with MScripts, we really did not have any brand presence. We were a nobody in the industry at one point in time. So technically, the brand is the leadership team. The brand are the founders of the organization. The brand are people like me, who's probably at the top of the organization trying to build it out. So the personal brand is of the leadership is what really counts and helps attract talent. In a lot of cases, and I can say that for sure, there are a couple of my team members who are part of this webinar as well. A lot of them take that leap of faith with the leadership team. So it's really not credibility that's built to the product or the organization, but you just take that leap of faith. And I'm really privileged to have a lot of people who've trusted me and joined me in that entire journey, the way it stands as of today. So at the end of the day, when you're building out your team ground up with limited brand presence, you just got to reach out to people who you really know. It's basically a personal network, ex-colleagues, friends of friends, and neighbors, family, who you really trust as a part of that journey are the ones you should probably bring into that organization. And you need to pick right-minded individuals who are aligned with that product vision or the business vision. And that's the only way in which you can actually grow the organization. Now, the individuals who you hire at the beginning have to be strategically aligned to the organization's vision. One should really avoid hiring people who are generally available. There will be plenty of talent available in the industry, but just getting people on because they're available or certain skills available in the market is probably the wrong thing to do, at least at the initial stages of growing an organization. So you need to be very careful about not hiring the wrong people, because excess flab in an organization leads to a lot of complications as well as limitations in terms of growing the organization. And at the end of the day, the first few hires have got to almost internalize your product vision. They've got to sign up for what you're trying to build as an organization, what you're trying to build as a product. And they, in turn, will become ambassadors for the organization. So that, in turn, leads to a snowballing effect, wherein one person learns from the other, and then they attract more talent. They have friends, they have families,
right,
who can actually join the organization as well. And that kind of snowballs into this high-performing organization. I've seen this happen back when I was in MScripts, I'm seeing it happen right now while I build out Louisa as well. And I've been tapping into my network to get people on to join me in this journey of building Louisa. And they in turn are bringing in a lot of their friends who they trust. And they probably talk really highly about Louisa and what we're trying to do and how it's going to change the way we are operating in the people intelligence space. So that's what we are trying to build at this point in time.
Right. So something that you said, right, leveraging your own network and leveraging connections that you have. And I think in this aspect, it also becomes important for hiring managers, not just to build the employer brand, but also a personal brand there, right? Yes. So having that following, knowing that, positioning yourself as an industry leader becomes so important there.
Yes. No, absolutely. So there's a bit of marketing that goes into this, right? So all of us are in this game of marketing. So it's not just the marketing team that's responsible for creating a brand for the organization, but I think the employees of the team are also building out that particular brand image. So talking specifically, right, a hiring manager typically is known within the organization. So they're already known within their team. Even if it's a large enterprise, you're probably known by other leaders within the organization as well. But what's also important is for them to focus on building that little brand presence outside of their immediate network as well. So it could be through social media, it could be through taking sessions outside of their typical comfort zone within an organization as well. But building that brand is extremely important. So trying to grow that network, trying to get the right people to help you as a part of any journey is what all of this really helps with. So I think, the hiring managers definitely play that, apart from doing their regular day job, there's this additional hat that they wear knowingly or unknowingly, which is that of a marketing expert. So they've got to be very, very conscious about the brand image they're building for themselves, which in turn can help the organization.
Right, definitely. I totally agree. And as someone in marketing, I completely agree with that notion that everyone is definitely involved in marketing in some point or the other, whether you like it or not.
Absolutely.
So building up that statement you said, right, about managers being forced to wear many hats. So in the early stages of a company, when you're supposed to wear different hats, and one thing you're definitely bound to do is also become a recruiter, right?
Yes.
So in your experience, what was the process you followed while creating a hiring strategy for hiring across hierarchies in an organization? And what are some tips you can share with our audience on how you drove this entire initiative?
Sure. The few things that I've done in the past, and it's probably not necessarily that this is going to work in the future because the industry keeps evolving, right? Now, a couple of things that I've done is, obviously the hiring strategy will vary based on the organization type and the position that you're hiring for. The role, position, all of this really matters when it comes to the hiring strategy. So I'm a big fan of building teams from top down. So essentially, I would prefer hiring heads of various divisions or various pods, so to say, that I would really want to hire first. And then in turn, let them build their organization within that little pod. So it's, and now those hires have got to be carefully thought through and deliberate. The initial set of hires that I just did mention about that a little earlier, they need to have bought into the vision of the product or the organization, and they should be brand ambassadors of what we are trying to do as an organization. So the first few hires are extremely important. So building the organization top down is what I typically prefer. The second aspect is about holding the initial hires accountable for building their own team. So you've got to empower them. You've got to hold them accountable for what they are building out. They know exactly what their team requires in terms of the skills, in terms of the seniority as well. They may want to build out a specific pyramid the way they would really like to drive their initiatives within that little pod. So giving that flexibility and accountability to those second line leaders or those pod leads is extremely, extremely important. Now, obviously, you cannot hold them accountable if you do not give them the flexibility as well, right? So they have to have the flexibility. They need to feel empowered in terms of being able to build out their own teams. Now, Number three is I also look for balancing out the pyramid. So I know there's a lot of talk about succession planning, and that's one aspect about balancing out the pyramid. But it's about having complementing skills across the board. So let me take an example here, right? So since all of us are techies, I'm sure we've all built web applications sometime or at least hired for teams that build web applications. So typically, you need a front-end engineer, back-end engineer. Everyone looks for the most elusive unicorn called the full-stack developer, which is fairly hard to find in the industry. But that's where the hiring manager or the pod lead needs to really make those tweaks, saying that, okay, I cannot get a full-stack developer today, but maybe I can balance this out by getting a front-end engineer with a bit of back-end skills and a back-end engineer with a bit of front-end skills. And let's see how we can have those complementing skills complete the team. Eventually, it's important to show a career path where you make all of these engineers full stack engineers. And I've done that back at Mscripts, and most of my engineering team ended up being full stack engineers over the journey that we had at Mscripts. But that's the complementing skills that needs to be thought through when you're building out a team pyramid as well. Now, the leaders of those pods are the best people to tweak those hiring strategies on the ground. So if I really would want a database engineer, as an example as well, or a data science engineer, they would probably need to make that decision as to why they would need a data engineer or a database engineer to get into their pod and help out with a certain piece of work. So I would really hold my team accountable and give them the flexibility to build out the pod that they really want. One aspect that's always forgotten, and I've myself been guilty of doing this, right, wherein we do not write a job description in a good way. So in a lot of cases, we take a job description for granted. I worked with a large enterprise where if I said, okay, I needed a full stack engineer, there would be this canned job description that's pulled out from a repository of thousands of job descriptions that I'm given to tweak and then put out there on LinkedIn or any portal. But that's probably not the right way to do it. I mean, it's a great point to get started. But I would think that the hiring manager should write that job description from scratch. They've got to be able to explain as to what skills they really need, what are the mandatory skills, what are the optional skills. But in general, the way I structure a job description is about having a few sections in place, right? So one is it's about the company. So you've got to have a glimpse of the company written in that first section. You've got to talk about what you really do, what the business value is that you're trying to deliver through a particular product that you're trying to build. And the second section is about why should you join us? So it's about the employee value proposition that needs to come to the fore. You need to answer the question, what's in it for me? Why should I join your company? And what's it that I would get as an employee of your organization or team member within your pod? What's it that I would gain out of this? So you need to talk about what your value proposition is, what differentiates you from a bunch of other roles and opportunities that's available out there in the industry. The next section is about the role itself. So this is the most exciting part where I think that the hiring manager should write the section straight from their heart. They've got to write as to what is it that they think would be most important as a part of the job. How is it that the individual can make a difference? It's got to evoke feelings, I would say, in a lot of ways to kind of excite employees or future employees to join your company and even read about your role. Finally, last but not the least, you've got to talk about skills that you really need, but definitely differentiate between the must-haves and the nice-to-haves in terms of skills and ensure that this entire job description is concise, precise. It's got to have good language and not the typical corporate jargon, which is boring in the run-of-the-mill JD that you would find on the internet. So that's one strategy. So the other aspect that I particularly emphasize on is about hiring the right culture fit. And this might just sound cliched, but I live and breathe this, because if you do not, you can teach anyone anything, right? But if you do not have the right culture fit of people within your team, within your organization, it's fairly hard to pull off an idea at that point in time. So you do not want people who are order takers, but people who can actually go above and beyond and be agile and look beyond corners and figure out as to what is it that they should be doing differently to make your product or your idea successful. So hiring for the with the right mindset is obviously very difficult. Now, obviously, everything that I just said is fairly hard to achieve, sounds unrealistic as well. But I would think that the best starting point is your own network. Again, goes back to the same thing that we talked a little earlier. You must need to find people within your immediate reporting circle who are people within your network who've played this role before, who've done something very similar before, who you can trust with some of this decision making as well. And I think that becomes a foundation for success as you grow the organization.
Yep, I definitely agree, especially with the points you mentioned about an EVP, right? Your employer value proposition. So we've also created a small blog on employer branding strategy. I'm just going to add it here in the chat for anyone who wants to look at it and check out something there. If you're having trouble or you want to go through some of the steps that Mahesh mentioned, we have a lot of the similar steps there where you're talking about how to build your EVP and things that, your possible employees would like to see, like even an L&D program or things like that. So I'm just adding that there. About what you said, Mahesh, about the job descriptions and sometimes things get lost in translation there, right? For what you expect out of a developer or what you expect out of the candidate that you're looking for. But sometimes that doesn't necessarily get translated into the job description if you're using just a canned model. And so it's highly required to get it very personalized or even put in things that a recruiter might not know, right? Which brings me to our next question. When we have slightly established startups or small businesses, at this point, we have recruiters, we have talent acquisition, we have HR, but communication and communicating and engineering managers' needs to them often gets lost in translation there again. So when your talent acquisition team finds it hard to hire for specific technical roles, especially, what is your solution and how have you been able to, translate these requirements better?
So great question. I've been through these hiring challenges as well before. And I would think it's a healthy tug of war between the recruiter as well as the hiring manager. And both of them are right in their own regard, because the hiring manager is trying to hire the best candidate available and the recruiter is trying to close the position as quickly as possible. So these are equally good and interesting ways to look at the problem. Now, to talk about the specific issue that you highlighted where requirements get lost in translation, I think it's a matter of communicating this effectively. So, which means the hiring manager should be sitting down with the recruiter, explaining the requirement in as much of detail as possible. In fact, I've been a big fan of hiring managers sitting down with the recruiters, shadowing them. Let's look at these resumes together. Let's kind of filter the right profiles together and see it's good if the hiring manager can give the recruiter instant feedback saying that, okay, this is what is good about the profile, but this is missing, or this is what we really need, and which is why this profile does not match the requirement. So having that, I would call it a joint session between the recruiter and the hiring manager to review profiles together is always a good idea. At times, recruiters also need help to sell or pitch the role. So that's where inviting the hiring manager into the discussion and having the hiring manager pitch the role and the TA team should learn off the hiring manager. So they should probably be a silent spectator of those webinars or meetings where the hiring manager sells the role and probably learn from it. So, and that makes the whole process scalable because the hiring manager cannot sit and meet every single candidate who is shortlisted as a part of the hiring process.
Of course.
Now, this applies to both internal as well as external recruiters. So both internal recruiters and external recruiters need to almost live and breathe the business vision and talk about the role and in an equally passionate way. So it's really important that the hiring manager shadows the recruiters and helps out with this. There's also a possibility that the hiring manager does not understand the recruiter's challenge. So at times it's important to have that feedback loop in place, wherein the recruiter gives the hiring manager maybe a weekly feedback or real-time feedback about what's really going wrong with the entire process, and what are the suggestions that one can bring in to improve the process overall. So I think these are some of the aspects that we can that need to be fine-tuned on the go. So, but I think it just comes down to the hiring manager not playing a hands-off role. They need to be equally involved in the entire process from start to finish. And I mean, right up to onboarding the individual into the organization. The hiring manager is responsible for all of it. But I think these are great opposing forces, a great tug of war that happens between recruiters and hiring managers, where I think everyone's trying to do their job to the best of their ability, but somewhere the conversion doesn't happen because there's probably that breakdown of communication between the two teams.
Right. I'm going to take a quick segue here because I have a question from someone who's asked you, what do you do in the event that your recruiter is not a tech recruiter? And when you have to translate these requirements for a technical candidate there, how would you explain to them what they're hiring for in that case?
So I would think a lot of, so it's not necessary that a recruiter explains the technology, the architecture, the product roadmap in as much of detail, right? So there's only so much that a recruiter can actually do. But it's important that the recruiter is able to talk about the business vision, what you're trying to achieve as an organization, because they are also a part of the game. So the recruiter is a part of the organization in a lot of ways, and then you need to also live and breathe the vision of the founders in a lot of ways. So I would think that even a non-technical recruiter can help with those parts. But then, if there are questions that you're not able to answer, it's important that they get the hiring manager or somebody within the leadership team connected with the candidate to answer those questions in general. One thing I've seen about the evolving workforce across the last few years, at least, is that candidates want to know a lot of information about the organization. So if you are a big brand, it's perfectly fine. People understand what you really do. If you're an established brand in India, I'm sure candidates know what you really do. But if you're a big brand in a different country, or you're a startup with no brand presence at all, candidates would want to know a lot of questions. Incidentally, I was on campus a couple of months ago hiring some graduates, and I was really surprised about how well-read some of the candidates are. They were asking me about the technology roadmap, the product roadmap, the pitch that we have, funding, as well as an organization. What's our client pipeline looking like? Why have we chosen a certain vertical of customers over something else in terms of pitching a particular product? So they were really intelligent questions that I typically don't get to hear, but I was pleasantly surprised. So there are times even a recruiter, however technical you may be, you may not be able to answer some of these questions. It's important to get somebody from the leadership team, somebody, maybe the hiring manager as well, to help answer those questions. So it's about ensuring that the candidate has his or her questions answered, which is the most important aspect. At times, a technical recruiter can answer more questions than a non-technical recruiter, but the advantage of being technical, in my opinion, is just about marginal.
Okay, got it. So for our next question, I'm going to ask you something that I'm sure is on the mind of a lot of people here right now, because we are in the midst of terrible layoffs and hiring freezes right now. And in this situation, it can be stressful for candidates currently in the pipeline and for recruiters and engineering managers who need to prepare when these freezes get lifted, right? So what are your tips on continuously engaging candidates in such a case and creating a good pipeline for candidates when, the freeze is lifted there?
Sure. So first and foremost, the entire economic downturn and the freeze caused an outcome of it is really not deliberate in a lot of ways. So it is important that everyone is honest about why it's happening and what's really happening within the organization. At times, recruiters just go cold, saying that, okay, I don't know, I'll check and get back to you. They say things of that sort, or they say something like, or they probably do not respond to calls because they do not know what to say. But I think everybody, and I think this is where every individual within the organization is a brand ambassador of the company, and they play an important role with this. So the first and foremost is to remain candid, remain transparent about the reason why there is a hiring freeze. If you look at it, there's a spin to this entire aspect of freeze that one can capitalize on. So essentially, what the company is saying is that I'm actually going to protect my own employees and not hire more. So which means that you're a people first company. So it's important that you actually have that spin to your entire story, saying that we're ready to take you in today because of a hiring freeze, because we're protecting our own company. And that's an indirect way to kind of position how people-centric the organization is. And again, it's important that you reach out to the candidate personally and explain the situation. So at times, emails have standard answers, standard responses as well. But having that personal touch with the candidate helps keep the candidate warm in terms of being able to say that, okay, it's not happening today. We'll relook at this after 2 or 3 months or maybe 1 or 2 quarters and exchange personal contacts to ensure that the candidate can also stay in touch with you. At times, the situation can get quite difficult. So, which is where maybe the leadership team or the hiring managers should conduct a webinar for all the candidates who are in that pipeline and explain the situation as to what's really happening. So, a lot of information can be passed firsthand from the founders, from the leadership team to the candidates in the pipeline. And it's important to keep those candidates warm. So it's about being transparent about where you stand as an organization. Now, at the same time, it's not necessary that all the candidates you keep warm will come back and join you, maybe 1 or 2 quarters down the line, because there is a possibility that they have got other options or they might have changed their mind about what they really want to do in their careers and so on and so forth. Because we are living in a time of a lot of uncertainty and a lot of change happening as well. So it's important that we also build an alternate candidate pipeline as well. So we need to start reaching out to more people, build a candidate pipeline for maybe 1 or 2 quarters down the line, keep the brand image, the branding, the marketing of the company, of the idea going, just so that you can attract more talent somewhere down the line.
Right. And what about, for the candidates that are, say, in this pipeline right now, how would you say is a good way to engage them? Would it be, apart from just webinars, would it be better if engineering managers as well reach out to them? Or, how much is too much engagement? At what point would you draw a line and say, okay, this is probably enough right now. I think they will come back to us. Do you organize like hackathons for them? Would you have to, organize something else for them as well?
So I would think that the engineering managers reaching out to the candidates is a good idea. And I think since if that person was the person who's supposed to absorb the candidate into their team, it's good if they engage with the candidate if they really want that candidate to come back and join them in the future. I wouldn't say there's too much of anything. It's important that you do it at a periodic interval. Probably don't do it every week, but maybe every month, maybe, and ensure that you're still engaged and talk about what's really happening within the organization, any updates as well. This is also the same strategy that one follows when you have a candidate who is in your joining pipeline. Recession and job cuts, hiring freezes aside. But when you have somebody with a 30, 60, 90-day notice period, it's important that you keep engaging with that individual in the same way. So you invite them to maybe a few of your global team meetings where you talk about how the business is doing and how the product is evolving, and ensure that they're equally excited about what's really happening. Conducting a hackathon could just be a heavy lift, in my opinion. But if you're just looking at a way to keep them engaged and ensure that you kind of use that as a way to market your product and talk about interesting technology challenges that's present, that's a great way to actually present it to candidates in the pipeline.
So building up the the whole hiring freeze thing, there is also a flip side, right? Like when you're talking about hiring freezes, it's obviously painful for people in the pipeline. But what about your own employees, right? People start to get skittish there. People are definitely afraid. Is my job safe? Am I going to get laid off? What do I have to look forward to there? So what would have you dealt with such a situation, given that the recent, whatever the situations are, or in any of your previous organizations, especially since you've worked with a lot of startups, right? And attrition is something that is quite high in different startups at different times. So, how do
Yes.
you engage them there?
Yeah. So hiring freezes, recession, all of this does add to a lot of pressure to the employees internally within the organization. It's important again for everyone to be transparent and communicate where the organization is at. So, as an example, if you're a part of a startup and you've really not been able to secure funding, it's good if the founders talk about where we are at with funding and be open and honest about it, right? So either there's something that's somebody that's interested in funding the idea and which is coming up, or it could be about trying to address any open questions, any cause of anxiety within the team. So it's important to have that rapport going with the entire team and communicate in an open and honest way. So, but that's the only way in which you can continue to engage with the existing employees, because you need to tell them the truth about what's really happening, about whether there's going to be a challenge up ahead, or whether you're doing okay as an organization, and probably get them involved in the entire process, because at times we get some really good ideas ground up again, wherein the team members might have some better ideas on what we should do differently as a leadership team. So the collective intelligence of a larger team is much better than a handful of them. So I think I would probably use that as an opportunity to say that, okay, yeah, we are here because of this reason. These are challenges up ahead in front of us. Do you guys have any ideas on what we can do differently? Because we are looking for more ideas at this point in time. And we've been through that challenge quite a few times. Back in my previous company, we did change our technology strategy, our business strategy a couple of times. That did create a lot of anxiety on the ground. But as long as we were able to communicate that effectively as to why we're doing certain things and why the strategy is better than the previous one and how it's going to generate results, and we probably address questions or maybe hear more ideas on the ground, I think the team was fairly okay. I didn't really see attrition, people ejecting out because of anxiety, because of these reasons specifically.
That's good. That's a solid strategy, I think, in my opinion as well. Keeping them engaged to different levels. I also have a question here, which is another group of people we haven't targeted because of the hiring freeze. During the time of the hiring freeze and uncertainty, how do you keep recruiters engaged? Which is also a very good question here.
Yeah, absolutely. I've always wondered what recruiters do during a hiring freeze, but I think they can play a marketing role, right? Because the hiring freeze might get lifted at any point in time.
Right.
Example, every quarter is a new quarter. So it's probably the matter of just one quarter where there's a hiring freeze. The next quarter could be better than the current one. There's a high possibility there. So a recruiter can still continue to keep candidates engaged. It's also important for them to understand what kind of talent is available where. At times, doing study of the market by the recruitment team is also important. Size of talent, where do you get the right talent for a particular skill? All of those are equally good reasons to keep recruiters engaged through the entire day, just so that when hiring freeze is lifted, they can actually hit the ground running and come up with solutions on how to hire quickly.
Yep, definitely. And I agree with the point, about building your marketing pipeline also there, or even your employer brand, right? Like what we were talking about earlier. These are times when you probably have more of a chance to focus on employer branding, about building your EVP, smaller things you might not have had the chance for, when there's so much hiring going on.
Yes, no, absolutely. There are plenty of ways in which recruiters can keep themselves busy as well. But given that they are in the business of reaching out to candidates and pitching a role, it's also important for them to start keeping that brand alive, just so that when somebody is looking for a change or when the hiring freeze is lifted, the candidate remembers the organization and vice versa. So that's also important.
Definitely, definitely. So, one last question for you, Mahesh, because you're one of the first engineering managers we've had on this series. Usually, we always do it with recruiters. We've had so many different recruiters coming in and speaking to us. And so refreshing to get your thoughts, from the flip side, from the person who actually is taking on the team members, right? So, just to end this, I wanted to ask you, what are your biggest takeaways as an engineering manager? And as a hiring manager in particular, what are some of the things you've noticed from both your experience dealing with startups like Mscripts and Louisa, as well as, dealing with bigger organizations like Cardinal Health?
Sure. I think one aspect that I've seen, irrespective of the stage at which the industry is talent, culture, and leadership. These are three aspects that I think will always remain, irrespective of what state the industry is in. So it's important to actually value talent, groom your culture within the organization, and strengthen your leadership. So the values that you bring to the table as an engineering manager, as maybe a leadership of the organization, is what matters a lot. Three important lessons I can actually summarize by three important lessons that I've learned over time is hire primarily for culture fits. And this is obviously sounding cliched for sure, because skills can be trained, but getting the right culture fit is going to be so important for every organization. Be honest about the role, the company, the opportunity, and what's it that the individual can capitalize on by joining your organization. So it's about engineering managers, recruiters, hiring managers, anybody in the leadership team as well, being open and honest about the organization, the vision, and what you're trying to do. I've always found that being honest, transparent has led to some really interesting results. And it's not necessary that you have answers to all questions being presented by candidates. There are times you can actually say that, that's a great question. It's given me a reason to think a little more about this, but definitely is something that I would think and get back to you. Or if you have an idea on how we can solve this problem, let me know. So being open, honest, and acknowledging that you probably don't have all the answers is also a good way to engage with people. And last but not the least, and the most important aspect is to build a positive company culture with information going viral about everything happening within an organization. There are several forums where people discuss the culture, they discuss people as well in an anonymous way. It's important to build a positive company culture, which in turn can help attract more talent and grow the organization. So I think these are my three key takeaways over the years. One is about hiring for culture fits. Second is about being honest and transparent. And finally, building a positive company culture. And these are my three takeaways about for every hiring manager, engineering manager, every leader within an organization to build a successful organization.
Awesome. Perfect. So I'm going to move it on now to audience questions. And I have one right off the bat here about your culture, hiring for culture. What are some metrics that you look for while deciding whether a candidate is a good culture fit?
So more than metrics, I look for instances where the individual has gone above and beyond their regular role and done something out of the ordinary for the organization. So in terms of a culture fit, specifically what I usually look for techies who are willing to go above and beyond. I prefer if people actually pull things that they can work on instead of waiting for orders. So basically, they should be able to look at the product backlog, the engineering backlog, or look at the business and see what's it that they can add value with, and not necessarily wait for orders. In a lot of ways, I would think that the best culture fit are people who embrace uncertainty, convert an opportunity which is beneficial for both themselves as well as the enterprise. So you need people who can think differently and not be a cog in the wheel.
Right, definitely. And while taking interviews itself, just building off of that, how involved are you in the entire process as well? Do you look at candidates? Do you help screen the resumes and stuff as well, or look at it from the ground up, at least when you were in your startup days?
So, in a startup, you would insert yourself where the organization needs you. So, you really do not stick to a specific role definition. So, um, I would screen resumes, I would take interviews, I would pitch the role to a candidate. Probably would conduct the coding round, a technical round, a culture fit round. So you probably insert yourself where required as a startup. But I think for a slightly mature organization, it's also about trying to train other interviewers to add value to the entire process. So it's not about a leader like me inserting myself everywhere, but it's about trying to empower the team to actually play the respective roles and find the right candidate as a part of the entire process. So obviously somebody's unavailable or there is a shortage of hands, I get pulled into any part of the process, which is perfectly fine. But in general, it's important that you're able to train others with the entire model, with the entire success that I've had over the past, and ensure that they are able to carry that forward. So it's about building that in a lot of ways a succession pipeline of how to screen and find the right candidate in the industry.
Perfect. So I think if anyone has any other questions, please do put it in on our Q&A box there. But as we're coming in towards the end of the webinar, I have one question for you from us at HackerEarth. Given that you are someone who hires a lot for tech talent, and that's what we're good at, right? And when you're hiring for different tech roles, how important is it for you to compare credentials versus competencies? What do you look at more importantly?
So a lot of ways, competencies matter more than credentials. Definitely the pedigree from where the candidate comes from does have a certain weightage. But if you're looking at a typical startup, you're hiring for skills. So skill-based hiring is the most important. You're looking at people who can actually do their job really well. So for example, I've in the past I've hired people who are probably not even graduates, but the typical standard across the industry is to have a bachelor's degree and a master's degree for a particular role. But in a lot of ways, that's probably irrelevant when you're looking at skill-based hiring. So pedigree and maybe where the individual comes from a college standpoint is probably not so important. But you're looking at whether the individual brings the right skills to the table. Obviously you guys know this better than me, where HackerEarth helps with a lot of skill-based hiring as well. And this is one of the platforms that we lean on in terms of finding the right skill for the organization as well. So I would think that hiring for competency or skills is more important than anything else.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mahesh. I think with that, we're at the end of our webinar. Thank you for taking the time out, a good solid hour of talking to us about so many different insights on your hiring strategies for the ages. I think there are a lot of takeaways. In fact, there's so many takeaways that we will probably be releasing a blog of this soon. So to everyone in our audience, if you would like to see more such resources, please do fill in our survey form, because we're taking a survey of what kind of resources we'd like to release to our recruiter community. Do fill that up so that we can create the right sort of content out of all these webinars as well, from different the viewpoints of different industry experts. And Mahesh, thank you once again for joining us. It was great having you on board. I think we had some really insightful conversations here today, and I'm sure there are a lot of takeaways. I hope you have a great rest of the week. Thank you once again, and I hope to have you back again soon too.
Absolutely. Happy to help, Rebecca. You can just give me a call and happy to join you with any other discussions that you may have. But thank you for inviting me. A pleasure being a part of this entire discussion and the whole series. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you again. To everyone in our audience, you can follow Mahesh on LinkedIn. He has a lot of great insights there as well. And do keep in touch with whatever he's up to, because he's doing a lot of exciting things now. Okay. With that, Have a good rest of the week, everyone. And thank you again for joining us. Please do fill in our survey form and we will be in touch soon.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Mahesh. Bye-bye. Have a great rest of the week.
Thank you. You too. Bye.